New Yorkers and visitors alike are heading to New York City's extraordinary experience that you have to feel to believe. Summit One Vanderbilt, an interactive multi-level experience of art, sky, and exploration. Discover exhilarating heights, explore reflective spaces, walk among floating silver orbs, and immerse yourself in spectacular views of New York. Book your visit at summitov.com and start your journey here.
Get ready for the journey of a lifetime. Omega Metroid is excited to launch a new series exclusive to our Patreon channel, the Great Metroid Area Ranking. Our mission is simple. We are going to rank every single area in the Metroid series 2 at a time. Join us on our Patreon as we delve into all the different locales across this amazing series and get in on the action by helping dictate what areas we rank next. The Great Metroid Area Ranking is available to all Omega Metroid tier patrons. Join us on this incredible adventure and help us decide for the final time which Metroid area is the greatest of them all. OmegaMetroid.com's Patreon is the home to the Great Metroid Area Ranking, ROM hack reviews, the Spiteri Show, and so much more. Consider signing up today, and see you next mission. Hello everyone and welcome to the Omega Metroid podcast from OmegaMetroid.com. My name is Andy Spiteri and I'm here to let you know that unfortunately mine and Dax and Doom's schedules just didn't quite meet up this week, and we didn't get a chance to sit down and record a new episode. So I'm sorry to give you that bad news, but I'm hoping that we can soften the blow a little bit here. We have a Patreon unlock on tap for you this week, and it is a doozy of a Patreon unlock. This was actually the final game that I played so far for the ROM hack review series, which was all about Super Metroid Ascent. And this game was crazy. It was super difficult, super hard, and it was really awesome. Now, it's been about a year since this episode came out, maybe a little bit less, but it's been a long time. So I'm actually looking forward to re-listening to this episode myself, just to kind of refresh what my thoughts were on this game. It was a doozy of a ROM hack. Like I said again, it was definitely an experience. So like I always say, and I'm sure that I'll say this during the episode, if any of you out there have the means to go and try some of these ROM hacks, I can't recommend it enough. There's so many amazing, talented developers that dedicate so much of their own personal time into making these projects for us. So I really recommend that. Like I said, if you have the means, you go and check it out. If you're really painting for some new Omega Metroid content this week, we don't exactly have it, but 2/3 of the band was able to head on over and join a fun Game Explain conversation this week. So Doom and I were fortunate enough to have the day off when this recording took place, so we were able to hop on and talk Metroid Prime 4 with Joey Ferris and a couple other guests, which again you can check out over on the Game Explain channel. So hopefully that, and hopefully ROM hack reviews holds everybody over. We will return next week when our schedules are a little bit back to normal a little bit. And I guess I should mention as well that speaking of Patreon, we will have a new Great Metroid Area Ranking this month. So that is still on tap. That is going down, and that will be released. If not by the time that you're listening to this show, then maybe tomorrow. So that is still coming. So if you're really looking for some Omega Metroid content for this week, you do have options. Again, I'm sorry that we couldn't get our schedules together. We tried, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. So instead of skipping a week, we thought that we would reach into our back pockets and pull out a great episode from the vault. So that being said, I hope everybody enjoys this ROM hack review of Super Metroid Ascent. Take care. Hello, Omega Metroid patrons, and welcome to another episode of ROM Hack Reviews. This is the final episode of ROM Hack Reviews for the foreseeable future. This segment will probably come back, but it will be a different kind of segment. Maybe one for the regular show. It was ROM Hack Reviews, as I mentioned last month, is a little bit tricky to pull off monthly just because some of these hacks are so detailed and in-depth. But I am a little bit sad. It's a little bit sad. This has been a fun journey. It's been a year's worth of Metroid ROM hacks, and during that time, man, just got to play some of like the who's of great hacks like Rogue Dawn or Junkoid or Super Duper or Vitality. Like just it's so amazing. It's so impressive what these hackers are able to do that I am a little bit sad that this journey is coming to an end, or at least it's ending for now. It's ending for now. Like I said, I think we will revisit the concept in a while, but as we know it as a Patreon feature, it is going to be retired after this show. So a little bit emotional going on right now. And I want to, speaking of emotional, I just want to give a special thank you to everyone that reached out and sent well wishes. I really appreciate it. It's definitely been a long couple weeks, I'm not going to lie. And I really appreciate everyone's patience with getting this episode out a few days late. As we'll talk about in the episode here, there were some snags beyond my personal life, but I appreciate everybody being cool with this being a couple episodes late. The next, I was gonna almost spoil something there, but the next Patreon show is definitely on track for this month. It's coming out probably towards the latter part of the month, and I'm really excited for it. And I was hemming and hawing whether I wanted to reveal what it's going to be now or whether I wanted to reveal at the end of this show. And I think I'm going to save it for the end, because I think if we were to start talking about what's next now, it might do a disservice to this ROM hack that we are here to talk about today. And I have a lot to talk about this ROM hack that we are here to talk about today. So that being said, I think that maybe we should just get this ROM hack review up and on the road. And of course, today we are talking Super Metroid Ascent. So I've seen a lot of people say that this is the greatest Metroid ROM hack ever made. And that's why I chose it, because I wanted to go out on a really high note. So a little bit of detail here. I think, as some of you guys know, I started off with a lot of not longer, but more full-length games. In the last couple months, just tried to do games that were going to be a little bit quicker, a little bit more digestible, let's just say, for me in my spare time. But this one was completely different. I knew this was going to be the last one, and I wanted to, like I said, end out on, or go out on a bang. So Super Metroid Ascent is the game this month. It's the first game listed under the hacks over at Metroid Construction. I want to say it's I'm going to fact check myself right now actually while I'm saying it, but I want to say it's one of the top rated hacks over on Metroid Construction. It might be one of the top actually. And it's difficult, and I knew that. But I wasn't prepared for maybe how difficult or how massive this game was going to be. So without further ado, let's get into it. And of course, we want to start off by mentioning the author of this incredible hack, Benox50. So shout out to Benox50. He did an awesome job, and it's actually crazy because that was his first hack ever. And in fact, it's one of only 2 hacks that this guy has ever done. So he kind of built it and then pieced out, and I guess retired on top. So I mean, shout out to Benox for giving us such a wonderful hack. So let's start off and let's talk about the premise of this game. And there's a lot of unique features here, but it kind of starts off the regular Super Metroid intro, stuff like that. And Samus basically says, I was informed the pirates are conducting experiments on dark, dangerous parasites. They investigate their ability for corruption. I must ascend my way from the bottom to the top and exterminate these parasites. So, fairly simple premise. That's really all the story that there is in this game, but there's it's kind of a cool idea that we're working on, because what she says there, like, I must ascend from bottom to top, is really kind of the whole crux of this game, and it works out in a really like interesting way that actually I've never seen another Metroid game do this necessarily. Probably compare it to Metroid 2, or like maybe Samus Returns or AM2R. Any one of those variants, I think, is what you could compare this game to, except like in reverse. So basically, you start at the depth of the planet and you're venturing your way up, 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 and up. And maybe it's actually similar to Metroid Dread in that respect, but it differs a lot from Metroid Dread, and it's more similar to Metroid 2 in the sense that, like, so there's 3 areas in the game. And you start off in Area 1, and then you progress to Area 2, and then you progress to Area 3. But I would say pretty much exclusively when you progress to area, like the next area up, there's really not any reason to go back to the previous area unless you want to go and get like any expansions that you may have missed or whatever, right? Like there's really not like a whole lot of reason to go back, and there's really not a lot of viable ways to get back. Like really, there's one elevator that takes you up from area 1 to 2, and then one elevator that takes you up from area 2 to 3. So it's pretty segmented that way. But I will say that that's kind of offset by these 3 areas themselves, because they are massive. Like they're massive. I would say that each area, maybe this is too far, but it felt that way when I was playing it. I would say each area is almost the equivalent of like a full-size Super Metroid map. And if not, maybe if that's going a bit too far, I would say like at least like half of a Super Metroid map, at least per area, because each area kind of has a couple different themes going on. So it's not like Metroid Fusion, for example, where like Sector 3 is the fire area, Sector 5 is the ice area. You know what I mean? Like Area 1 had multiple different kind of sub areas to it, where like there was like your typical Criteria like area with all the rocks and stuff like that. There was kind of a more green Brinstar foliage kind of area. And then in level 2, you kind of got over to like, there were some research labs, and then there was some red Brinstar places, and then there was like a toxic waste kind of area. And there's, you know what I mean? In the like level 3, we kind of have like a lot of it's based off Meridia, so there's a lot of rocky water kind of gimmicks. Some of it is kind of molded after the wrecked ship. And then, of course, when you get to kind of the final throws there, you end up in a place that looks a lot like Torian. So each area does have like its own multiple like different sub areas, which kind of gives each area, you know, like a little bit more of a unique kind of blended identity, I guess. So that works out really well. But I would say that the areas are like, oh God, they're almost too big. Like they're ginormous, and not just like in terms of like the map itself, which is obviously ginormous, but like the individual rooms, like a lot of them are just huge. Like they're huge rooms. So there's a lot of stuff going on. It took me a long time to get through this game, and I would say that it was tough. There was a lot of moments, particularly at the end in Area 3, where I had like no idea where to go at all. So it was definitely challenging. And one thing that kind of adds to the challenge too, which is kind of a central gimmick of this game, is that Ascent asks you to, I can't remember what they actually call them, but they're basically like different points on the maps where like little I don't know, machines are that help the parasites grow, or like, I don't know, something like that. There's a bunch of MacGuffins that you have to destroy on the map, and I think each area has about 3 or 4. And so that's your primary goal, is to find all these different MacGuffins and destroy them. And they're literally just like thing that you can bomb, and then they're done. They're dead. But one thing that kind of adds to the challenge with that is that Super Metroid Ascent uses like a different kind of lock and key system where there's like what's a proper word for them? Basically, it's like linked rooms that you can go into, and the way that the game kind of wants to steer you is that there's a bunch of these linked doors, and they're marked as such on your map with a D. So there's a bunch of these linked doors, but you can only open the linked doors from one side. So you can get to a point on the map, see a doorway, and oftentimes it's just not, the doorway is inactive, and it's not going to be active until you venture further and get there in a different way, and then you activate those doors. It's actually kind of similar to Metroid Fusion when you have to unlock like the different locks, like the security level locks and stuff like that. Same kind of idea there, except a lot of these ones are like the doors are directly linked, so you have to open up the left side in order to activate and open up the right side. So this is found like throughout the game, and it can kind of be frustrating at times because if you were to look at your map, you would then say like, oh great, like I haven't progressed past here. You might head to that point and then realize that the door is not actually available to you to go through. But it is convenient later in the game because then you can go back and, like open the door, and then you have a shortcut to navigate around the world, which does help. Another thing that helps navigating around the world as well, speaking of, which is kind of the same idea, is there are warp points, but they warp to the same like area. So you can't find a warp point in, I don't know, area 3 that will take you back to area 1. You can only warp from area 3 to another point in area 3, which is, I feel like, a little bit of a missed opportunity, but it still does make it a little bit more convenient for traversing around a lot. There's like I said, the maps are so big that these points really do kind of come in handy. But they're another one that you have to find like the warp point first and unlock it. So it's not like you can find a warp point. So let me back up actually. When you find a warp point, or a warp door maybe more specifically, you go into another room and it's called the Void. And the Void has, let's just say, 5 or 6 different doors that you can go into. But all of them are going to be locked if you haven't found the place on the map that lets you actually like activate that yet. So it's not exactly the same as in, let's say, for example, an AM2R, when you get to the distribution center and you can take all of those different points to different areas, and like maybe you're going to get to somewhere that you've never actually gone through before because you're at this warp point. It doesn't work exactly like that. It's really just for fast travel in and around the map. But I didn't really find it actually all that helpful, to be honest. Like I thought that it was as helpful more so just to kind of get to where I was going and run the map, versus take those warp points, because they're so sporadically laid out. And once again, the map is like so massive that by the time you've kind of went through the warp points, through the doors, kind of got your bearings again where you pop out, it's like, yeah, maybe I should have just like taken the long way and just got here myself faster. So but it was like kind of a cool idea, and one thing that I think kind of, again, gives a little bit of a unique identity to Super Metroid Ascent. So let's talk about another thing that I always talk about. I kind of run down a checklist when I start these Metroid ROM hacks. And you guys are probably sick of hearing me talk about it by now. But I will say one thing that obviously I picked up upon right away was the music. And the music it's remixed, but not much. But not too much. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but like, so the first, I would say half of the game has like the red Brinstar theme playing, for example, in an area, but it's remixed like slightly, so it's not like exactly the same, but it's not completely different either. I would liken it to like if you ever hear like, I don't know, a musician covering another song, and like it's the exact same song, same words, same whatever, but maybe their cadence or some of the delivery of the specific lines is a little bit different. So it's the same music, but remixed slightly. And as you progress into the game, to be fair, you do hear some original compositions, which I think is like very cool. I'm a big fan of like, adding, even if it's not like new music. Like I remember we did, what was that game? I think it was the Metroid Zero Mission, the Scrolls one, where they had like the Donkey Kong music and the Zelda music, and like I just think like having different Metroid music is like such a unique identifier, because you can only, when you hear the Norfair theme, you're like, oh, like I'm thinking of Norfair, I'm thinking of Ridley, I'm thinking of all those enemies and stuff like that. Whereas, if you hear a different theme, it kind of helps, at least in my mind, kind of get you into the game a little bit more. So that was cool to see, especially in the latter areas where they did have more, like more music. So that was cool. The backgrounds and the sprite work themselves are phenomenal. This might be actually the most beautiful ROM hack that I've played. There's not a lot of new enemy sprites. Most of them are Super Metroid enemies, with maybe, I was going to say like maybe like a handful of new enemies. But like most of them are like kind of smaller enemies, like the parasites specifically. And they're just kind of very basic pixels. But like every enemy looks awesome. The color palettes for almost every enemy has kind of been flipped. So they, when you see a space pirate, it looks like a space pirate, but it's remixed a little bit. So it does look cool. And I mean, I'm no graphic designer or anything like that, but just the way that these games, like the way that the backgrounds look is just spectacular. I remember Vitality had some absolutely incredible backgrounds as well. I would say that this is probably as pretty in a lot of areas, but like it also has like a sense of kind of grit to it as well, which I feel like Super Metroid has. So it strikes a really fine balance between like these really gorgeous views, and like I said, a lot of these rooms are like massive. But I think that it also has kind of that eerie atmosphere of like Super Metroid, or even like Metroid 2. So yeah, I would say like again, I might rank this as one of the prettiest ROM hacks that I've ever played. So getting into the game itself. So the game starts fairly normally. I'm going through, and I'm venturing through the planet, getting my first couple items. One thing that I've noticed about this game right away is that I think that the game does a really good job of not making power-ups like too obtuse. You know what I mean? Even though this game does have the same problem as other Super Metroid hacks, where like, when you're looking at the map, there's a dot, and that dot means that there's an item there somewhere. And even if you get that item, it just still shows up as a dot. And as we all know, that's been corrected in future Metroid titles. Metroid Fusion and on would have a circle, and when you've got the item, it's a dot. That doesn't exist in this. And I mean, that's just kind of a like byproduct of Super Metroid being a 30-year-old game. But I do wish that they would be able to change that. But that being said, I do feel like the items were laid out in a fairly like non-obtuse way. And that's not to say that they weren't hard. A lot of them were hard to get. But what this game will do instead is, I mean, there's a lot of points on the map where you do have the dot, so you know that you have to check that area out. But one thing that this game does a lot, which I've noticed, is that it will, the map will just kind of end, but when you look at it, it's not, like the grid isn't closed, let's just say. Like the box isn't like box. It looks like you can continue on, even though there may be a wall there or whatever, right? Like if you were playing and looking at the actual game, it would look like there's nowhere else to go. But if you were looking at your map, it would be like, oh, like there's more, there's more to this corridor. So when you see that on your map, then you can do some digging around, and oftentimes it leads to, there's a bomb tunnel or something like that, or whatever, right, that you can progress a little bit further in. Sometimes it leads to expansion, sometimes it leads to warp points, sometimes it just leads to like literally the way forward. But I thought that the game did a really good job of that. But so I was exploring, and so I didn't quite know what to expect, because I got a weird combo of items to start off with here. So I got the morph ball first, and I was like, okay, yep, this is good. Got the bombs next, and I'm feeling pretty good. And then I got the plasma beam, and I was like, oh, okay. And then after that was the grapple beam, and I was like, oh, all right. And you already start the game with the various suits, so you have that. So the order of items was a little bit sporadic, and it stayed kind of sporadic in that sense, actually. Like the last the last big acquisition item that you get is the space jump, and I'm jumping a little bit ahead here, but the order of items was a little bit weird. So I was kind of wondering to myself, I was like, well, I wonder if the order of bosses is going to be.
This holiday season, New Yorkers and visitors alike are heading to New York City's extraordinary experience that you have to feel to believe. Summit One Vanderbilt, an interactive multi-level experience of art, sky, and exploration. Discover exhilarating heights, explore reflective spaces, walk among floating silver orbs, and immerse yourself in spectacular views of New York. Book your holiday visit at summitov.com and start your journey here.
A little bit weird. And, it started off pretty normally. So I got to the chorizo fight, and I'm a sucker for chorizo. I think that fight is always fun. One thing that I did notice right away is that bosses actually have an HP counter in this game, which I think is very, very cool. And not like a bar like in Metroid Prime, but it'll have something similar to what Samus has, where it'll count down from 100 how much HP the boss actually has left. So I thought that was just a cool, neat little touch. So I did Spore Spawn next, and he was likewise fun. And at this point, I'm kind of figuring out a lot of these bosses kind of have extra gimmicks attached to them to make them a little bit tougher. So Spore Spawn had way more, the room was smaller and there was way more critters in that room. The chorizo fight was mostly the same, but Spore Spawn upped the ante a little bit and just had a little bit of a different sequence to it. And then afterwards had a really fun escape sequence that reminded me a lot of AM2R's power plant. So I was, I was kind of all right, we're going off to, to a good start here. I was feeling pretty good. I wasn't feeling underpowered, anything like that. So I'm playing and progressing through the map. And by the way, actually, one thing that I want to shout out that, my God, this was so refreshing. But I'm playing this game, and if you open the map, each room has its own name. Like in Metroid Prime, each room has a name. So I can't tell you how difficult it is writing the guides for Metroid Fusion or Metroid or Super Metroid. And you're trying to describe some of these rooms, and if they just had a name, it would be so much easier. So instead of saying to people in the Super Metroid guide, so you have to go to the pink bubble room in the middle of Brinstar. If you could just say to them, this room is literally called Pink Bubble, so you can't mess it up. That would be so, so, so nice. I've never seen a 2D ROM hack do this. I thought that this was the most spectacular thing. Most of the names were kind of ironic and goofy and funny, which I think takes away a little bit. But the fact that they had names at all, oh my God, this was so awesome. Which also makes it a little bit more frustrating why you can't maybe change, change those dots to circles, or have the ability to look at other areas in the game, even if you're not in that area, which is something that I've bitched about multiple times on this show. But I don't know, maybe that's just something in the actual Super Metroid code that you just can't change. I don't know. So I was going along, and then I mostly got through area 1 no problem, and that was, like I said, that was kind of the more introductory level. I think that area 2 is when the game really kind of started popping off, and there was this really fun segment. I mentioned this toxic lab earlier. There was a really fun segment where there's I don't know how to describe it. Smog might be the best word. And so there's smog hanging in the air, and it's 2D obviously. So it's presented essentially just as almost floating lava or floating poison or something like that, right? But so it's in the air, and there's a lot of really, really cool puzzles where you have to essentially avoid that, which I thought really added a lot of utility to the game. And there's also this cool gravity gimmick, but I don't think they use it to the fullest extent. But there's this gimmick where if you get into Morph Ball form, you can, if you're rolling along and you hit let's just call it a green specific block, your gravity will be inverted and you will go roll on the ceiling. And basically until you unmorph or you're hit, you'll stay with that particular sort of gravity. The other way that you can get down is if you hit like the red switch. That will bring you down as well to regular gravity, let's just say. So there was a bunch of those puzzles as well, which I thought was like pretty cool. Again, I don't know how much they utilize it to its full potential, but I did think that it was pretty neat. And so yeah, I was going through and exploring this really fun like this toxin section, and the next item I got was awesome. And it was the Boost Ball, which is a blast in 2D. So essentially what it was you'd get into Morph Ball form, you'd press A, and you'd literally just boost ahead of you. So instead of holding down A or whatever button you guys used to run faster in Super Metroid, instead you just press it for a moment, and then you are off to the races. It seemed like so simple and so... like such just like a no-brainer idea. I'm actually surprised that nothing like this has been implemented in any 2D Metroid games, because it was basically the same idea as the cross bombs in Metroid Dread, where like often there would be like a big row of pitfall blocks or whatever that you'd need to get across, and the boost ball would help you get across them before you could fall, which is what kind of Metroid Dread did as well. But the boost ball like took you way further than the cross bombs did in Metroid Dread. So really cool gimmick, and I thought that it was fun. And I used it to fight... oh, dude. I fought this really messed up looking Crocomire. He wasn't as messed up as in Vitality. That was like really disgusting. But he was like a pretty bad boy in this game. He was kind of all blacked and scarred and ripped and torn and stuff like that. So I was fighting him, and it was actually kind of cool because like there was like, I don't know, something on the ground during that Crocomire fight, but you actually started firing off like Hyper Beam ammo that you would usually have at the end of the game. It didn't really do any more damage than a missile or any beams or anything like that, but it was kind of cool to see like Hyper Beam going on and whatever during this fight with Crocomire. So I defeated him, same as always. He fell into the lava. And then afterwards, I was gifted the Toxin suit, which is a badass sounding suit. And it looked cool too. It's like, it kind of looks like that Smash Bros. Green variant of like the Varia suit, where like Samus's shoulder pads are green and like her middle is yellow still. So very cool, as the name implies. It lets you traverse through, through the toxic areas a lot faster and a lot more safely. So that was pretty cool. And I would say at this point, I was like, man, this game is like really clicking. I was a few hours in at this point, but I was really kind of digging it. So not long after that is when I got the Speed Booster. And the Speed Booster in this game is unlike anything that I've seen before in any other Metroid game, Metroid hack, anything. It's incredibly unique, and I think it's both good and bad. So what the Speed Booster does is it's actually slow. It's not fast at all. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Shine sparking is actually slow. Like it's completely, you're crawling actually. You're not going fast whatsoever. But the reason that you're doing this is because you can change the directions of the shine spark as you're shine sparking. So you can go like up, down, left, right, whatever. You can turn into a ball while you're doing this as well if you need to get some clearance. So it's very cool. Like it's a very cool idea to be able to change directions while you're shine sparking. But of course, in Super Metroid, when you're shine sparking, you're taking damage as you're doing this. So going slow doesn't always necessarily equate to it's not good for your health while you're shine sparking. But it was a really cool gimmick, and there were some like really cool puzzles and expansions that you do in this game with that feature. So it was very unique. I've never seen it done in another Metroid game or even another Metroidvania at all, actually. So I thought that it was kind of a cool risk to take. You can jump while you're actually speed boosting too, just like a Metroid Dread, which I thought was pretty cool as well. And another thing that you can find in this game is there's actually items called, I want to say they're called Shine Spark E Reducer. And so what that essentially means is that your damage doesn't drain as fast while you're shine sparking. So it was kind of like a very, it's a simple item, but like I thought that like it was a simple but logical piece of business that you really could only find in Super Metroid, because this is really the only game that you take damage while you're shine sparking. So it was, it's a little things, and I kind of been a big proponent of this for a long time, where like, there comes a point where you don't need any more missile expansions and you don't need any more power bombs, but like items like that, I think are like very cool and maybe something that actual 2D Metroid should consider. So let's go. I was progressing through Area 2, and the next boss that I fought was Ridley, which was kind of weird because there was like this psycho Ridley fight first where like you kind of fight him and then like he just flies away. And I was like, okay, all right, whatever. So a little bit later in the map, I get to the actual Ridley fight, and he's the first boss that I've faced since Spore Spawn. So I was just like, all right, that's weird. And I fought him, and he was like pathetically easy, actually. It was like they put the Zero Mission Ridley in this game by mistake. So that was a little bit disappointing. But then I got to Kraid, and holy shit, this dude was a absolute tank. He was crazy hard, which seems like really insane to say because it's usually the opposite. But like Kraid, he had an outrageous amount of HP. And I think that the thing about the Kraid fight in Super Metroid, just like the base Super Metroid, is I consider it easy, and I think that most of us probably consider it easy, but the thing about that fight is like the longer it goes on, the harder that it gets, and it's only easy because Kraid doesn't have very much HP in Super Metroid, so you're able to, you can quick kill him with like 3 super missiles if you really want, and if you miss that quick kill, it really doesn't take you a very long time to beat Kraid. Like you can beat Kraid in a fairly, I don't know, I would say like less than 3 minutes, but if his HP is beefy, like look out, because then you've got all those like stomach gross platform things shooting at you. There's stuff flying around in the air everywhere. There's spikes on the ground. It was the exact same Kraid fight except mirrored. He was on the left side, I was on the right. But just the amount of HP just made it so difficult. Actually, so on my first try, I beat Kraid. I beat him, but I had like 2 HP left. Okay. And so I finally hit the last shot, and I could see the animation that he was dead, and I was like, oh my god, yes. And then I fell on the ground and hit the spikes and killed myself. So we both died at the same time. So it was not good. I had to go back and then I had to fight him again and beat him again. And it was really hard, actually, but kind of felt accomplished. And it was actually a little bit more strategic than I remember a lot of the Super Metroid Kraid fights being, or the Zero Mission Kraid fights being, for that matter. So, a really good Kraid fight. Maybe behind Dread, like the best Kraid fight that I've done. And there's another insane escape sequence after you beat Kraid, like another one, and it was actually like incredibly detailed and outrageous. It was like an Ori and the Blind Forest escape sequence. That's how kind of intricate it was. So it was a pretty cool, memorable boss fight and a good way to end off on Area 2. Got to Area 3, and like I said, it's kind of the Meridia of this, but like, so I get there and I don't have a gravity suit, and I'm thinking like, great, I'm really hoping I can get this soon. And so I'm progressing through, and I have to say, I never thought I'd say this in my life, but man, the bot wound fight was insane. It was so hard. So there's a couple different things that made this like absolutely ridiculous. One is that there are these platforms everywhere, and there's these like, I forget what the enemy is called, but it's a super fast enemy that just like, it'll basically do like a square, he'll go in a square path around the entire room. So this stupid little thing is flying around all the time, and if you kill it, another one just pops up. The second thing is that the room is slowly filling with water. So like, your movement with all these platforms is like severely impaired, and Botwoon, as we all know, is like incredibly fast as he starts taking damage. So I feel a little bit ashamed saying it, but like, this was like a really, really hard fight. I used all my super missiles, I used all my missiles, and eventually I beat him with like like one missile left, and I finally was able to get out of there with like barely hanging on by a thread. I would say too, by the way, that I feel like the amount of like I never felt like I was incredibly like under equipped. Like I always felt like I had a fair amount of energy tanks, a fair amount of missiles, super missiles, etc. Like the game certainly gets harder, but like I never thought that it was hard because I didn't have enough resources. Like obviously I didn't finish the game with 100% items, and like I didn't have all the energy tanks or whatever, but I felt like I had enough to, you know, to contend with some difficult enemies and stuff like that. And I think there's like at least 6 reserve tanks in this game as well, and I ended up with 4 of them. So that's all just to say that like this was just a well-designed, hard fight that you know really was just challenging. So it wasn't artificially challenging, which I thought was kind of nice. So the unfortunate part of this actually is that afterwards you get the gravity suit, which replaces the toxin suit, which is like this gravity suit just looks like the regular gravity suit. So it's kind of too bad because I kind of had grown accustomed to the cool looking toxin suit, right? So a little bit disappointed in that. So a couple items that I got next, I got the screw attack. The screw attack was completely useless in this game. Honestly, it was. The screw attack is my favorite item in Metroid just because you feel like such a badass when you have it on. But like, I don't think that the screw attack killed a single enemy with a jump in this game. Now, you could jump through them and you could jump and you wouldn't take damage by anything, which I guess makes it not useless. But it doesn't have that same destructive power that we've kind of associated it with in games prior. One kind of cool thing though is that you do get instead of like the traditional Super Metroid screw attack animation, you kind of get like the hyper beam animation. So you're doing like this rainbowy color thing as you're jumping. It looks pretty cool. So that was a plus. And then afterwards, I got the wave beam, which this wave beam was completely unlike any other wave beam that we've seen in the series. Again, so what made it different is that it really travels slowly, like at a snail's pace. So you fire it, and I mean, as the name sounds, it fires 2 beams, and they start kind of waving, so they're going up and down and whatever. But they're traveling so slowly that it really doesn't make it viable to actually use them in the game if you're fighting enemies. So I actually only turned on the wave beam when I needed it, which wasn't very often. One thing I noticed too is that the wave beam, if you fire it a lot, really like slowed down the game's performance by like a considerable amount actually. So that was too bad. I never actually got the spacer beam. I found it, but I couldn't get it for whatever reason. I couldn't figure out the puzzle, and at this point it was like at the end of area 2, and I was like, okay, I want to get a move on here. I want to get going. So yeah, the wave beam was a little bit too bad, and at this point, like in area 3, the enemy difficulty like really started to ramp up, to the point where like you're like a basic enemy would take 2 or 3 super missiles in order to defeat. And like if we're talking like space pirates or any of those like upper echelon enemies, it was a trip trying to defeat them. So this game really kind of upped the difficulty for sure. So I finally got the goddamn space jump in this game, which made traversing way easier. I got the ice beam shortly after that as well, but man, like going through this game without the space jump versus with the space jump it really was almost like flicking a switch, and it did make a lot of traversal a lot easier. Let's just put it that way, especially because, as I mentioned, the rooms are like so insanely massively big. So I wanted to actually point out another part in the map. So is this crazy ass puzzle involving, you know, those moving enemies that just like kind of jump up and down, they like zigzag and they make like the diamond shape or whatever. There was a room, and it was called the mind puzzle room, and there was a bunch of blocks that only these enemies could break, and so you had to kind of you had to lay a power bomb to get them out of this like confinement that they were in, and then you kind of had to like guide them over to these blocks that you wanted them to break. And I won't go into describing the entire puzzle, but I wanted to shout it out because it was like the biggest. I mean, really, it was like a mind bend puzzle. It took forever. It's probably the longest puzzle I've ever done in Super Metroid, like any kind of version of Super Metroid. It was way too long actually, but it was still kind of fun and rewarding at the end. I got a weapons tank damage increase as a reward. So yeah, there you go. There's actually 3 of those in the game, but I only got 2, which didn't really noticeably increase my offensive output, but that's neither here nor there. One thing that I will shout out, so I'm in Area 3, and now I'm kind of getting towards the end of the game, finally. And one thing that you don't see very often in Super Metroid hacks, at least that I've noticed, is the actual Super Metroid, the baby Metroid. And there's this kind of cool room where, like, there's a bunch of Metroids or whatever, and they'll follow you, and eventually, almost like an X-Parasite, they'll kind of merge together and create a bigger version of an enemy, and that's what they do, is they merge together and create, like, the Super Metroid. And unfortunately, it's just an enemy in this game, but I thought that was cool to see that sprite show up, because I don't recall actually seeing that in a lot of other Super Metroid hacks that I've played. So here we are now. So I very distinctly remember this part, where I felt like I kind of hit a wall. I was so stuck. I had no idea what to do, and I spent at least an hour and a half just like traversing the map, running around, not just like banging my head against the wall. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And by chance, I happened to go back to another room that had a great outdoor, and there was this weird enemy, a new enemy in this game, but it was a weird enemy that I had to defeat, and I had tried shooting it earlier in the game, and none of my weaponry was really working on it. And so imagine like a ball with like a floating circle around it, and the circle has like 2 breaks in it where you can get your missiles in. So eventually I tried going back, and I blasted these guys with super missiles, and after about 10 super missiles, he was destroyed. And this thing actually like hit me with a laser that completely, like, it took away every tank I had. It was like being hit by Mother Brain at the end of Super Metroid. Like literally, if I didn't have reserve tanks, I would have died. So this enemy basically killed me, and I killed it, and I finally was able to progress. But there is like a real stretch there where I was just like, oh my god, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, what is going up? And of course, no guides or walkthroughs or nothing exist for these games. So I was just like, and my feeling was like, oh my god, I'm already behind on this show. Like, I can't just not beat this game. So that was a little bit stressful. So I'm thinking that most people playing this won't have that kind of added time crunch that they're imposing on themselves, but I did. So that made it a little bit of a slog afterwards. But when I finally did beat those enemies, the game opened up for the final stretch. And the next boss was Golden Chorizo, and that was kind of fun because like there was actually like a chase sequence before the fight. So like you had to go in this morph ball tunnel, and then the Golden Chorizo dropped behind you and started slowly making his way towards you. So you're boosting, you're jumping, you're doing those like gravity red-green things that I was talking about earlier to kind of avoid him. That was pretty cool. And then the actual fight against Golden Chorizo, I really love that fight. I think it's the most underrated fight in Super Metroid, actually. And it was a blast. And I actually use super missiles against this guy, which is something that I almost never do because he can usually just catch the super missiles. But I had enough super missiles where I felt okay firing one, he caught it, and then I jumped up and fired another one that hit him right in the chest. One thing that I would say about this fight is that doing the Golden Chorizo fight with the screw attack definitely makes it a little bit easier. So that was good. And then I followed a path after. It's a fairly straightforward path. And then immediately after, you fight Phantoon. And I was like, okay. And again, there's this like smog that's hanging for the upper part of the room. So if you jump, you're going to get hit by the smog, which like this stuff drains your life like crazy. Like probably 2 seconds and a tank is drained. Like it's killer how much this smog drains your health. And so I actually went to this Fantoon fight immediately after fighting Golden Chorizo. So I had like 2 tanks left, not very many missiles or whatever. And actually I was kind of surprised to beat him. And not really have that much trouble actually beating him at all. Which was kind of funny for like such a hard game. And from after that, I went to, you follow the path, and then you get to the final boss. Dragon wasn't here, by the way. Or maybe he was, and I just like didn't end up fighting him, but he was the only boss that I never encountered the whole game. But I went through, and I got to the final boss, which was not Mother Brain. Mother Brain doesn't appear anywhere in here. It was this really weird enemy. And this enemy, I believe, is called the Source. The room itself was called the Source. And what this enemy was, it was like this pixelated... It almost looked like the Missing No from Pokemon. For all you old schoolers who know what that is. It was like this pixelated flying blob that just flew around. And he didn't try and attack you. He just flew around in this ginormous room. And you had to like pepper him with super missiles. And he had just an unbelievable amount of HP. It was crazy. So it probably took like half an hour for me to actually beat this guy. Because of course as you hit him, he starts flying way, way, way faster. And there were like these little like enemies that would appear. They were like little floating cloud things. And those, thank God, you could screw attack through, and you could get health, you could get missiles, stuff like that. So it wasn't really like I wasn't in danger of dying. It took a long time, too long, I would say, actually, to beat this thing. But once I did beat it, then the final escape sequence was triggered. It was a 5-minute escape sequence, and hell, I ran, and it was a long way to go. And instead of a lot of other games, I guess I shouldn't say that. I was gonna say like you run through like a large portion of the map to get to the escape sequence, and I guess you run through the map in like Fusion and Super as well. But it felt like you were in there for a lot more. Like you were in a lot more rooms that you were already in beforehand. Anyways, so I ran, and finally escaped this goddamn planet. However, I did not save my friends. Maybe that option was there, I'm not sure, but if it was, I didn't see it because I looked for it actually. And you did see the Edakuns and Decoras. I didn't see the turtle guy or Shack Tool though, but I did see them, so sorry to them. They were stuck on the planet, and I finished the game with a clear time of 7:25 with 70.7% items. Now, I was using some save states and other stuff in there, so I would suspect that I would probably pushing 9 hours with my save time, actually. So it was pretty intense. And like I said, there were a lot of like really mind-bending puzzles that frankly I was just like, I have no idea how to do these. I got to get this episode out. I'm just going to get this done. So there's a lot of meat left on the bone to go back and explore, and maybe my pal Dragon is in there somewhere, I'm not sure. But yeah, so my thoughts are a little bit conflicted on this hack, because in the write-up here I said like, does this soar above all the other hacks or crumble under its own ambitions? And I would say for the most part, like I think that this hack does like a fantastic job of presenting like a really unique and really like a different kind of Super Metroid experience, like far different than a lot of other hacks have offered. But I do think that at times it kind of gets caught up in its own grandeur. Like, I think that it's a little bit, it indulges in itself a little bit too much. Like, it's too long, the rooms are too big. Some of the puzzles, not that I don't want like awesome puzzles, I do, but I would say that some of the puzzles do feel like a little, I mean, listen, this is for veteran Super Metroid players, so like probably to them it's not that big of a deal, but it does make it a little bit less accessible for your average Metroid fan who might be interested in getting into the world of ROM hacks. And in that sense, I would say that like this is almost like a hike, like a like a 50k hike or something like that. Like you have to build your way up to it, right? Like I would never recommend this to someone as their first Super Metroid ROM hack. Like it's too difficult, it's too big, it's too long, and there's too much going on. I would say that if you are a Super Metroid veteran and you're looking for a challenge, this is probably exactly what you want. So yeah, it really, a really, really great hack. I wouldn't say it was the favorite one that I've ever played, but I think that it was the most ambitious that I've played, and it had a lot of really, really unique ideas. So again, shout out to Benox50 for creating Super Metroid Ascent, and what a wonderful hack that it is. And I would, like I said, I wouldn't recommend it to people just starting off in the world of hacks, but I would have no problem recommending it to big fans of Super Metroid and really skilled players. So there we go. Okay, so that's the last ROM hack reviews for a while, and it's finally time to talk about what's coming next. And I'm excited about this because it actually doesn't require as much prep, but I think that the conversation is going to be a lot more fun, and I'm going to get all of you guys in on the action as well. So replacing ROM hack reviews starting next month is going to be what I am calling the Great Metroid Area Ranking. And so what that is, let me back up a little bit. So everyone here knows that I'm pretty good pals with a certain GUI fame of Virtual Theater and Zelda Dungeon fame. And so he has a fantastic YouTube channel where he has a series called GUI's Dungeon Dives. And what he does is every video is a new video ranking a dungeon in the Legend of Zelda series. And he decided to go chronologically. So we ranked every dungeon in Zelda NES. He ranked every dungeon in Zelda 2, Link to the Past, etc., etc. So we're going to steal that gimmick. and actually, GUI is going to join me on my first episode of the Great Metroid Area Ranking and do that with me. And so what we're going to do is we are going to do the exact same thing with Metroid areas. And there's no entirely set criteria. Maybe we'll have one as we go along, but we're not going to have a checklist of this is really good this way, really good that way. To start off, we're not going to have that. We're just going to kind of freestyle, and we're going to talk about how we think these Metroid areas are and how they stack up against one another. One thing that we're going to do is we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to do 2 areas per month. 2 areas per month. And we're not going to do them in any kind of sequential order. We're just going to pick 2 areas. And that's where you guys come in. So we're going to pick the first 2. GUI and I are going to pick the first 2 areas to start off. But after that, we're going to throw up a poll on Patreon, and we're going to give you 4 choices about areas that you would like to see us cover next. And again, you can suggest areas that you want, and we'll put them in the poll, and we'll see. The only rule is that we're going to do 2 areas per month, and they're going to be 2 areas from 2 different games. And if you're going to suggest places, they have to follow that. They have to be 2 areas from 2 different games. And we want to kind of try and space out some of the heavy hitters. So we don't want to have month 1 with Findrana and Torvus Bog, and then next month is Sanctuary, Fortress, and Brinstar. We want to get some of those other areas that we don't get a chance to talk about a lot into the mix as well. And frankly, some of the areas that you hate can really make up for good podcasting. So I'm really excited about this. I think that it's going to be a lot more fun, a lot more a lot less prep work, and just a lot more of a fun, flowy conversation. And I'm excited for you guys to get in on the action too. So like I said, we're going to throw up a poll, and you guys can vote on it over on Patreon, and whatever wins is what we're going to end up doing. And you can suggest away in Discord, in the patron chat, and let me know what your suggestions are. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. The Great Metroid Area Ranking. So for reference, there's 100 Metroid areas. So we're going to start off with 2, but I don't know. Maybe we'll even up the ante in a little bit as well. We'll see how the first couple episodes go. But yeah, I'm really pumped about this. I'm really excited. I was looking for something just a bit different to do, which I think that this is going to offer us. And I'm really looking forward to talking about some of these areas that, we don't get to talk about some areas on the show. We have Mapping Metroid, where we can do the big well-known areas, but there's a lot of other areas that, frankly, you just don't have an hour's worth of content for. And so I think that doing it this way allows us to kind of, give some love to the areas that don't necessarily always get that love. So that's going to be debuting this month. GUI Fame is going to be joining me for episode number 1, and I'm really excited to get going on that. So there we go. So yeah, that is it. That's ROM Hack Reviews. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this series, and I hope that this has inspired you guys to maybe check out some of these different ROM hacks. It certainly inspired me to start this ROM hack journey and really kind of open my eyes to the whole other world really that's out there if you're a Metroid fan. And I know that we've been eating good lately with Fusion and Metroid 2, Metroid Prime Remastered and stuff like that, but there's been long periods of time where there hasn't been that new Metroid content. So these hacks, I feel like, are just like a really, really incredible way to to be a Metroid fan, but play something new. So I'm grateful to everyone that has made a hack. I'm grateful to all these guys that that have made the hacks that I've reviewed here on the show over the last year. And I am excited to eventually go back to this series down the road. But I'm really looking forward to the Great Metroid Area Ranking. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And hey, it's never too early to start throwing out suggestions for next month. So next month is going to be April. Let me know in the patron chat like what you want to see, like what areas that you're interested in doing. So yeah, there we go. All right, well, that is going to do it for this month. Thank you to everyone for supporting Omega Metroid. Again, thank you to everyone just for your patience with this last month. I want to say on a personal note, I felt a lot better recording this podcast than the last one. So sorry if the last Spiteri show was a little bit somber, but feeling a little bit better these days. And I think that everyone's understanding and kind words and stuff like that really helped. So I just want to extend my love and say thank you for that. And yeah, we'll see you in just a few short weeks for the debut episode of the Great Metroid Area Ranking. I'm stoked. Until then, everybody, take care.